Okay. Says we're live. So, I'm not that familiar with StreamYard, so hopefully everything's working good and I will be able to see when people come on. I think I know what to look for on that. But anyway, yes. Oh, hey, guess what? My phone just said we're live. I probably should have, muted that before. Anyway. Nicole's obviously gone, so I get to hijack everything again today. So, don't worry. I did really, really thorough notes about 10 minutes ago. So, with Nicole being gone, I obviously have to manage everything by myself, including taking care of myself, which requires, stopping and cooking food, which is just, don't get me wrong, I love food, but having to stop and take the time to cook instead of just handling everything else is just irritating. But anyway, so Nicole is obviously in Texas, so I have everything here. I kind of just went through and got the main categories, so this isn't going to be everything that she does. I have no idea what events to highlight or whatever. I don't know, I don't have access to her email. So anyway, yeah, I guess we'll just roll straight in. She usually does forage and garden and all that separately. I'm kind of rolling it all in together because for me, the property is basically one giant garden of some sort or another. She's got the upper garden. I've got a couple of specific spots that I have raised beds and aquaponic systems and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of other places that we planted edible stuff, whether it be for people or for livestock. So with her upper garden, she gave me a list, which I mostly remember. Didn't write it down, which I should have done, but I have made sure everything stays watered, whether by rain or sprinkler. So there's that. I do need to get up there and get some mulch on some plants. She showed me some stuff to look for, so I know there's a couple of beets coming up. There's a little bit of radish coming up. Oh, another note is I'm also doing this from, the screened-in porch down at the cabin, which is kind of my zone. And I like the screened-in porch because it's kind of the land between two worlds. You've got nature out there and all the luxuries of home here. So, I get to sit in my chair, but be outside. But you also get the dog bursting out the door a second ago because apparently there's something evil out there that needs to either get chased off or die. So there's that. But anyway, she's got some stuff that's actually coming up in the upper garden. There's some stuff that needs to get mulched in, but everything is actually doing fairly well up there. Given what that used to look like, it's actually getting a lot more manageable for the areas that we've been focusing on. So there's that. Now, like I said, I've got a bunch of other areas that I have, and a lot of that started as there's this really rocky area with weeds that are 7-8 feet tall, and I can't run a lawnmower there. So I wound up going in and pulling a bunch of rocks out, went scorched earth on everything, and then built rock walls and filled back in with whatever dirt, soil, rabbit manure, litter out of the duck coop, whatever I could find. So I just did another area like that in between her house and the cabin, and it's several big slab rocks. But there was a spot in between two of them that I was just going to clear all the dirt off of the rock so that just nothing would grow there, and then don't have to worry about it. But turns out there was a hole in between the two rocks. So I'm like, well, that ain't going to work. Well, I've got all of these rocks scattered through the yard that need to go somewhere. So I started using those to build a rock wall around this hole, which made the hole deeper and also gave a border to be able to mow up against. And, you know, to this point, the grass will come and no further. So one of that hole particularly, there's a couple of other places over there too, but that hole particularly, I went on and just took every last bit of dill seed that I had left and just scattered it in there. So that just started coming up a couple of days ago. So her dill patch came up and then got messed up, and it might come back, it might not, we'll see. But anyway, that's going to give a second place on the property where we might end up with a decent dill patch. Grass. Yes. I'm going to talk about the grass. But not as usual. Usually when I'm talking about grass, it's just the fact that we have grass, because like last summer was just brutal. With like the sheep would go through an area and nothing would come back. Like even trying to run sprinklers, stuff really just didn't come back. Now, like everything everywhere is coming back, but it's interesting walking through because we've done a lot over the last year and a half. So there's been excavators, there's been stuff getting regraded, there's been rocks pulled out, there's been animals run through. And so depending on what happened with an area, there's actually different grass coming up in different places. And some of it might be like this whole area over here is this primarily one kind of grass. And then this area over here, you can see like that's where we ran the excavator through, because there's one kind of grass growing there, and right next to it is a cluster of something completely different. So it's been interesting just watching that. But one of the key parts is there's a lot of grass coming up, but not a lot of weeds. So there are some places where, yes, there is a lot of weeds coming up, but kind of what I did with that was I waited as long as possible to mow the first time. And then when I did mow the first time, like I wish I could have raised the deck on the mower up even higher. And so I cut it as high as I could. And then that was just kind of to get everything level. And then right before her workshop, I did a really good, nice mowing. And then yesterday, up until the rain started, I got most of the yard mowed for a third time. And so kind of starting to see a little bit of multiple kinds of grass coming up in most of the areas. But it's just, I bring that up just because it's something to watch, which kind of leads me into the next thing. Is another area that I've been working on a lot is what we call the hip camp area out behind the goat pasture. And that used to be just completely overgrown. You couldn't walk through it. It was a nightmare. And kind of similar, I kind of went scorched earth on most things, left, a lot of the trees, some of the saplings. and didn't go, complete scorched earth on the grass, but anywhere that was not grass, I pretty much went scorched earth. And now a lot of that has come back in grass, but I noticed a couple of days ago, there's a bunch of wild mustard coming up in that area, which is odd to me because usually around here we see wild mustard in pastures that are overgrazed. I see it a lot in the goat pasture right now because I need to be able to start rotating the goats around, and so they're spending way too much time in the pasture. But it was a little bit odd to me that I would see the wild mustard coming up there. So that's just an indication to me that that area needs a little bit of fertility. So I'm going to see what I can scrounge up to throw back there just to add some fertility into that soil. And so it's, with all of that combined, the grass and the wild mustard, and there's some other areas where there used to be nothing growing, and there's this one pioneer species of weed that's coming up heavy in some of these spots. Knowing what to look for as far as that stuff tells me what I can do with that area. So it's not something that I'm necessarily going to forage either for us or for the livestock, but knowing the different species of plants tells me what that area needs and what I can do with it. So the other pioneer species that's coming up right now, that's an indication to me that, hey, if I've got extra hay, I might be able to scatter that out there, get a little bit of ground cover, and it's going to actually start to build soil in that area. So that's something else that, I like to keep an eye out just to see what's coming up where and see what indications I can get off of it. Oh, yes. Compost tea. She wanted me to make some compost tea. I've not made compost tea. It was too late for me to make it before she left. And then I was like, well, if I do it now, it's going to go to waste because I'm not going to get to it. At least not right now. So I was kind of waiting to see kind of how this weekend is going to play out and what pieces are moving where and what dogs are doing sheep. And yeah, so probably tomorrow I will actually start some compost tea. Now, I do it a little bit differently than most people because why not? I mean, I'm a redneck, so why not do redneck things, right? I do not hold to the specific ratio of this and that and measuring the pH and whatever. Take a 5-gallon bucket, throw an air stone in there with an air pump for an aquarium, so you're aerating the stuff, and then I will take whatever I can find and put in there. Now, when I say take whatever I can find, that's both out of compost-ish stuff that I've made and stuff that I can just forage. So I've got worm bins. I've got a bin full of rabbit manure with worms in it. So it's basically a worm bin with straight rabbit and sheep manure. I have another bin that's all manner of different types of compost that came from various different places, various different forms, whatever. I, of course, threw worms in that. So I will pull from all of that and combine it into this bucket with the air stone. And then I will also go around and pull leaves from several different plants and stick them in a food processor and basically blend them into something resembling one of those hipster smoothie drink things, whatever they, it's gonna look kind of like that, but not something you'd probably want to drink. But we've got comfrey in a number of places. We also have a wild plant here called red dock that is similar to comfrey in the fact that it puts down a really deep taproot. We also have mullein, which I am of the opinion, because I've seen mullein grow out of sheer rock, like zero soil, zero dirt, just straight rock, and there's mullein coming out of it. So I personally think that one of mullein's jobs is to send its roots into the rock, extract the minerals from the rock, put it into its leaves, and when the leaves drop, it adds the minerals to the soil that nature is trying to build. And then also realizing that, the dock that I have right over there is going to be pulling different minerals than the dock that's, say, up by the upper garden, which is going to be different than the dock that's going on the side of the property over there. So they're all going to be pulling different minerals. So I will go pull leaves from all of those plants in different locations, put it through a food processor, and then throw that into the bucket with the compost tea. Now, normally, if you're going to make like comfrey tea, people say you got to let it sit for however long they say to let it sit, 2, 4 weeks, whatever. But when I completely eviscerate the leaf, it's not going to take long for all of the nutrients that are in there to seep out into the water. So once I get this done, I'm going to end up with a heavy concentrate of a really good tea with all sorts of stuff in it, both in just straight nutrient and in microbiology. So I haven't decided how I'm going to do it, but I think what I might do is strain this one off and then just take like 4 or 5-gallon buckets and basically pre-dilute everything, as opposed to fill a can up with the garden hose and then pour a little bit of compost tea in there, go distribute it, come back, pour a little compost tea in there. I might just go on and pre-dilute everything just to make it a little bit easier on me. So that's something I'm planning on doing probably tomorrow. And then I'm hoping if nothing goes wrong, tomorrow I'm also going to be transplanting a bunch of stuff. She's on a chocolate mint kick because she's got chocolate mint growing up in the rocks by the house, which is good tea. It makes a really good tea. And it does really well for kind of filling in the spots where we're not planting anything. So I'm planning on transplanting some of that in a couple of different places. And then we've got some other mints, bee balm that I'm planning on scattering throughout the property. So I've also got that probably tomorrow. So hopefully I'm planning on maybe getting a good amount done. Has 35 plants. Oh, cool. So reading this comment about Gravely Silt is where the mullein is, where it grows here too. And in-laws have 35 plants in the creek wash. Yeah, I would imagine the mullein would do really well in a creek wash. Where we would find the mullen around here to start with was up the road a little ways. There is a south face, or the on the north side of the road, so south facing, basically sheer rock coming down, and there was a ton of mullen through there that would grow. So I would go through every now and then and take maybe half of the seed heads, and just say I ended up with 5 of them. I'd take one over here, one over there, one back there, one down there, and one somewhere else, and just scatter it as much as I could. And at this point, I mean, it's coming up all over around here. There's a lot of rock down around the pond, so we've got it coming up down there. We've got it coming up around her house, where they basically took a bulldozer and scraped the ground until they hit slab rock, and then leveled clay out to level everything out, and built her house there. So the soil up there is not very deep at all. So we've got a lot of mullen that comes up around her house. There's a lot of areas down through the wash and going down to the watercress patch that's also a lot of slab rock with little to no soil. Some of it, like the rock, is actually covered with moss, but no actual soil yet. We're working on fixing that. But yeah, mullen tends to like really, really rocky ground. So and you only get seed heads every 2 years. So it's a second year thing. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, livestock. So we have another batch of rabbits that were just born. It was on the list of, we really need to move all of the babies over to this other cage because mom is pregnant and should be giving birth. And like, it's Wednesday, we should really do that. Thursday, it's like, oh, we didn't get that done yesterday. Friday, didn't even think about it. Saturday, it's like, we got to do that. Let's just go do it now. So we went down, moved the babies over, put a nesting box in there. I come out the next morning and I see a little bit of fur in with the hay in the nesting box, and it's like, oh, she must be. Oh wait, no, did that just move? I think that just moved. Did it move? No, I'm just saying. Nope. It moved. Oh, yep, there's babies in there. So we got another litter of rabbits, and then I came out, I think it was yesterday, and somehow one of them had managed to get out of the nesting box. Fortunately, it had to have been, within a couple of minutes when I saw it, because it was still alive. It was cold. So, opened the cage up, got it in my hands, got it to warm up a little bit, and then I set it back into the nesting box and was like, I'm probably going to have to take this thing like inside because it's not going to get back in there. And it literally like belly crawled like straight into this clump of fur in the nesting box. It was kind of amusing watching it get back in there with the rest of them. But other than that one, I haven't actually seen any of them yet, so I have no idea how many are in there. But we did get another round of rabbits, which is good. Also on the front of New Life on Homestead, what day was it? Wednesday, I think. Might have been Thursday. No, it was Wednesday. I was heading over to the barn because I have a list of stuff that I was planning on doing. And, I slow down to actually turn into the pasture and I hear noise coming out of my phone, and for whatever reason, I was like, I should probably stop and replay that. Normally, I would have just been like, whatever. I'll like whenever I get up to the top of the hill, I'll get off and start doing what I need to do, and while I'm doing that, I'll pull my phone out and replay the message. But for some reason, I was like, I need to just stop, hit replay, and Nicole was basically like, so to throw a wrench into everything you're doing, there are baby chickens in Cookville at the post office. So I really quickly did what I had to do with the sheep, and then straight back, drive straight to the post office to pick the birds up. Get in there, and there's a huge rack with massive boxes, like twice the size of what we normally would get, just full of chickens or ducks or whatever happened to be in a poultry. But then there was one box sitting to the side that was ours. So, I grabbed that, come back, and we actually went on and put wood chips in the new chicken coop. And then took the brooder, pulled the metal tray out of the bottom that, would normally catch all of the stuff. We just pulled that out and threw it to the side. It still has the grate that they stand on in there. And then we just put that straight on top of the wood chips. So if I need to, I can just pick the brooder up and move it over instead of having to clean the tray out or whatever. So I kind of figured out with the other meat birds we have who are wasting a ton of food, which I will get to in a minute. I kind of figured out, I think it's the feed. It's a crumble feed, and it kind of starts to crumble and turn into dust, and they just kind of, for whatever reason, they're kicking it out. So with the new birds, we obviously start with, a quart mason jar with the little red tray you get from Tractor Supply. And at first they weren't wasting a lot of it. Then yesterday they started wasting a lot of it. So this morning I was like, all right, what can I do? And I need, I want to put the feeders in another container. And, it's like, okay, I keep, if we get a 2-pound thing of peanuts, I'll keep the container because it's useful for things every now and then. I'm like, no, that's too small. It's look at various different things. I got a metal pan sitting over there. I was like, that's way too big. There's another plastic dish thing sitting over there. It's like, that's too small. Going through, and finally I walked down to the workshop, and there's a stack of various different pots that, plants, trees, whatever came in. And I found 2 that have the sticker on them. So it was the blueberries that we bought, I think, last year. And it's literally, you can set it right down in there, and there's no wiggle room at all, but it goes all the way to the bottom. So I was like, cool. Took a razor blade and just cut the top part of that pot off. So one of them, I left a lip about that high above the top of the feeder. The other one, I left a lip more like that, and just see what they do. So I pulled the lid off of the brooder, and I put both of those in there. And the taller one, I didn't think they'd be able to get at. I thought it was too tall, but I was like, I'm going to put it in here just to see. And a couple of them actually got in there and got some food out of that one, but the other one with the lower lip was obviously easier for them to get to, so they were all hitting that one pretty hard. But I sat there and I watched them for a few minutes, and what was happening was they would peck at the food. Some of it would get flipped out of the feeder, and it would get caught on the lip of the pot. And then as I sat there and watched them, they would start picking at that too. So what I'm expecting to happen is I'm going to go back down there in a little bit to check on them. And hopefully there's not going to be a buildup of food underneath of the feeder. And they will have basically picked everything clean in between the feeder and the pot. That's what I'm hoping to see when I go back down there, but we'll see. Now, with the other meat birds, they are still wasting a ton of food. A lot. To the point that I noticed, like, because I was only moving them to start with maybe a quarter of the length of the tractor every day. But I noticed as the feeder moved, that was an area where there was a lot of holes from rocks and having the excavator up there and everything else, and moving the chicken tractor across there, all of the wasted feed kind of leveled that whole area. So see what happens when all of that, decomposes and turns into soil. But I'm kind of like, normally I'd take them down and bang a left and then go wherever from there. But I'm actually kind of thinking, like, if they're wasting this much feed and it's going to level the ground, if I go down below the old pig pasture, which is still really rugged, I mean, there's all manner of ridges and potholes and everything. I think I'm taking them down there so that if they're still wasting this much food and it's going to level the ground, I'm going to put them down there so it'll level the ground a little bit. But I've got to go look to see. My plan is for the feeder I'm using for them right now is it's kind of an L-shaped metal feeder that you would like bolt on the side of something. I took two of those, put them back to back, and bolted them together. So if I can find an appropriately sized disposable metal pan, like, the little tinfoil pans you buy at Walmart, it's not tinfoil, it's a lot thicker, so it's a lot more rigid, but it's still pliable enough that I might be able to set the feeder in that and basically crush it in to put the same kind of a lip around the feeder. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to find. I've just got to go actually look to see if we have one and or go to Walmart and buy one, which I ain't going to Walmart just to buy that. I'll figure out something else or just let them keep wasting food at this point. Go to Walmart the next time I happen to be in town. But that's pretty much what's going on with them. There's always, with the meat birds, there's always at least one that gets dubbed Tiny Tom. He just doesn't get as big as the rest of them for whatever reason. Right now we got like 4 or 5 Tiny Toms. So there's a couple of them that for whatever reason are just smaller. And then with this breed specifically, which I can't remember what she said it was, it's also entertaining because you can really tell the difference between the male and the female. We actually had an interesting Mexican standoff between two of the roosters the other day. There was like a squabble, and then they both just sat there and like stared at each other for a good minute, like just glaring at each other. And then there was another little squabble, and then they were like, okay, we're going to go eat now. So that was kind of entertaining to watch. But anyway, what else do I have on the list? Sheep. Yes. The sheep are in the last paddock. This has taken a long time. But at the top of the hill where the sheep are, like, once you get towards the top, it goes from being steep to being really steep. And so it was between the grade and the weeds. When I first started over there, it was literally impossible to get a four-wheeler to the top of the hill. Now it's like, now that I've kind of gotten the lay of the grade and I know where the really steep parts are as opposed to the parts that aren't quite as steep, as long as the weeds aren't too bad, I can actually get the four-wheeler to the absolute top. But when I took them to the top the first time, which was a couple of months ago now, I kind of did two paddocks right at the top, but there was this area over to the left. And just the way the hill was shaped, the top kind of comes across and then comes back this way and rounds around and keeps going back this direction. So it's kind of like a peninsula of a hill right there. And I had not run them on that section. So as I'm taking them back up the hill, I got enough time to go out there, and I thought I was going to have to actually cut a bunch of decent size, like, 2-3 foot diameter trees out of the way, because there's a bunch of trees that have fallen over down the hill. But it turns out that there was enough room on the upside of that I could run the fence around that way. So we do have them in the absolute last paddock. Now there's two areas left on this piece of property that we haven't run the sheep. And those two areas, one of them I'm probably just not going to run the sheep there ever, because it's at like the absolute top of the hill. It's off in the woods, and it's like the crest of the hill comes out in this narrow little, 50-foot wide thing, and it just drops off on both sides. And then that comes off to a point at the end and just drops off going that way. I'm like, I don't really see a point in even trying to run them up there. So maybe, possibly one day, perhaps, maybe if I feel like it, I might run them through there just because. But there's not really, this is all old growth, so there's not even like a lot of saplings or anything coming up that they can forage off of. There's just really nothing up there for them to eat. So that area I probably won't run them through, or at least if I do, it's just going to be, I'm going to try to run them through there so they can drop a little bit of fertility and then get them out of there, because there's not really anything for them to eat. But anyway, that makes me really happy. And of course, there's another bad bird. Oh, yeah. Did you tell it? Did you tell it? Say, go away. Tell that bad bird to go away. She's telling the bad bird to go away. I speak dog, by the way. It's Redneck superpowers. Anyway, so I am very happy to have them through that last section. And part of that is because, as they drop fertility and they actually graze stuff, you can tell a massive, massive difference in what's coming back up. There's a lot of grass coming up, which that used to not be the case over there. And there are still weeds coming up, but nothing even close to what it used to be. So you can already see the effects of running the sheep through. So that was one of the reasons that I really wanted to push to get them into that last section, is just to start dropping a little bit of fertility and to actually get that area grazed to convince the seed bank of the fact that grass needs to come back up here, not weeds. So anyway, we've got that going. On to infrastructure. Yeah, infrastructure has been fun lately. There's a lot of stuff on hold. So we got the solar installed, and right now with the solar, it's hooked up, it's working. I could turn part of it on, but there's an issue with something. Not really sure what. It's something to do with the pump, and it's drawing. There's two legs for power, and it's drawing more power on one than the other, and nobody can figure out why thus far. So I'm waiting on one of our electrician friends to come back out, who I think will be able to shed a little bit more light on this based on his experience level, and some specific things that he has experience with. But there's a weird problem in there, and it's like you hook a meter up to it, and it's like that makes absolutely no sense. Like, the numbers, just, you should not be seeing that. You should be seeing this or this, but not that, and that's what we're seeing. So it's like, annoying. But anyway, so we've got that on hold. We've got some other stuff on hold with, her kitchen project and the electrical in regards to that. There's still a couple of outlets that need to get hooked up and so forth and so on. But we are plugging away at some stuff. There was a problem with when we put the water lines in for the new tank that's going up the hill. We kind of didn't regrade an area up against the pump house, but dirt wasn't in the same place it was. And so when we would get a heavy downpour, it was actually pushing dirt through the hole that we made where we ran the water lines in. It basically pushed all of that out. And so the whole floor in the pump house ended up covered in a really thin layer of mud from where it was washing through. So I started building that back up, and I had a 5-gallon bucket of dirt / clay that I dug up out of another spot that I needed to put back in that spot, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So I wound up taking that down there with a little bit of leftover hay, put the hay down, and then started, like, this bucket was full of water, so all the dirt and the clay was like really thin. So I was basically just taking a handful of it, slapping it down on top of the hay, and then just mashing it in so that the hay will kind of hold it all together until, some grass or something starts growing there to hold it all in place. And we've gotten 2 or 3 decent rainstorms since then. And so far, nothing's blown back out of that. So hopefully, that fixed one problem. But then also, in dealing with some of the stuff down around the pump house, I also found 2 sets of pipes. It's like, never knew those were there. I know where the other end of those pipes are, and I'd been wondering where those pipes went. And I thought they were actually buried in the ground somewhere, like the ends of the pipes were just buried somewhere. And what they are is the overflow for the cistern where the spring is. But now that I know where they come out at, I was down there yesterday and I realized, when the pond fills up with water after a rainstorm and gets all of the wash off from whatever soil, sediment, whatever ends up in the pond, that might be backflowing from the pond into the cistern, which could be one of the reasons we're having so much sediment problems with the water system. I always just assumed, because the cistern will fill up with sediment coming from the spring after a heavy rainstorm. So we just always assumed that that was the problem. So right now I'm kind of sitting there staring at that like, okay, well, what am I going to do to address this? Because, you know, the height of things is kind of set and you can't exactly change it. So I've got to figure out exactly how I'm going to make sure that, you know, the pond isn't backfeeding. I actually kind of would like a really heavy rainstorm just so I can see what happens when the pond fills up and what's flowing into where. Which brings up another interesting point is, you know, there's always a lot to do. And, you know, as homesteaders, we want to hit everything as soon as possible and just get it done. But sometimes, you know, not being able to get something done immediately can turn out to be a benefit. Because this morning I was actually, or might have been yesterday morning, but it's long days blur together. But I was sitting up under Taj Mahal and I was looking at some of the ways the water moves around the property in that area because it's going into like 5 different places. You know, you got a swale going this way, you got a swale going that way, you've got the French drain coming through all of that, and so forth and so on. You've got the gutter, you've got multiple roofs. And I was looking at the gutter and I was like, you know, it's possible that swale over there really doesn't fill up too much because it's not getting a lot of runoff just because of where it's at. I was like, I wonder if it's possible to route that gutter to empty into that swell instead of going into the French drain, which goes across a little bit of ground and then just goes into the pond. So that water is essentially coming off her roof and watering a little bit of grass, going into the pond, which overflows into the creek. So essentially that water for us is useless. If I can reroute that gutter and come across over here and get it to actually go into that swale, well, it's going to go into the creek eventually anyway, but then it's doing a little bit more for us before it leaves. So sometimes just taking a little bit of time to actually not do something can give you some ideas of what else you can do with it. So that's just a little thing on the note of infrastructure. But yeah, I think that's most everything. The only other thing I have left on my notes was holler neighbors. And unfortunately, there was a very, very sad event this week among the neighbors. And we had a loss within the community. And so let's all take a moment of silence for Night Hawk's refrigerator. Okay, so his fridge died, which leads to a very interesting game. Well, actually, several really interesting games because, you know, when you have a network of neighbors that work together and everybody has multiple fridges and freezers, when somebody's fridge dies, it's not that big of a deal. It's more of just an irritation because it's like, okay, we're going to take all the stuff out of here and put it somewhere else. But the first interesting game that leads to is, whose freezer did that turkey end up in? Like, you know, it ended up in a freezer somewhere. We're just not sure which one. So you got to go digging through all the freezers to find it. The second interesting game that leads to, which as of right now, we're not sure if we're still playing this game or not. We're not sure yet. But Mark Alexander's brats. With so many freezers and fridges around here, like, I don't know how many times we found the last pack of Mark's brats. The last one was right before her workshop. Like, we literally, it's been months. Thought they were gone, but Mark keeps on giving. So there is a possibility that somewhere, buried in a freezer, somewhere, somehow is hidden another pack of Mark's brats. So he's still kind of with us in that aspect. So that's another fun game that we get to play with all of the freezers. So anyway, I think that's all that I've got for today. And I've been rambling for almost an hour now. So I'm going to look to see what we got in the comments. This one, all Rich Reshuffle plus what do we do? The old one. So it turned out with his fridge, it was just an ice buildup. So I don't know. I don't remember. I think he got another fridge, but it's possible that one might have been salvageable. And if it's not, I don't know what was going to happen with the old one. All right. Pack rat, incubator, brooder. Oh, I'm assuming you're asking about the eggs, which I forgot to mention. Yes, we do have duck eggs in an incubator, and I think they're supposed to possibly be hatching like Sunday or Monday, somewhere in there. So Nicole might still be gone when that happens. I am set up to deal with that when it does happen, even if she's not back. Hopefully she'll be back by the time it happens. And then there's multiple plans, one of which is worst case scenario, I'm going to block off a section of the chicken coop with, a 2x12 or something, and move the chickens out of the brooder into that little area with a couple of heat lamps. And then the new ducks can go into the brooder. So that's kind of the worst case scenario for that. But we'll deal with that when the time comes. Raised bed question. Can you elaborate on that? What's raised bed? What's the actual question? And ice buildup might be a frost timer. Possible. I wasn't really involved with the troubleshooting of that one, so I don't know what it actually was or what was done. Problems I don't have to worry about. Still want to catch you sometime for a walkover of the place with security. Maybe combined with one of you. Okay, Pack Rat. Yeah. Send Nicole an email and she can forward it to me, and then we can touch base. Or y'all can always email me directly at tacticalredneckequipment@gmail.com. All one word, all lowercase. So you can send me a email that way, or you can just send an email to Nicole and she can forward it to me. So either way, but yeah. So give it a minute for anybody to put in any other questions, and then it's time for me to go get another cup of coffee and think about what I need to do for the rest of the day. So anyway, I know I'm not Nicole, but I try. Well, not try to be Nicole, I just try to do as good of a job as her. Yeah, this coffee's cold. But anyway, guys, till next time, catch y'all later. So many buttons to push.